Okay. Well, again, welcome everyone to the webinar for March 10th, 2017, put on and produced by the National Association of Park Foundations. This is entitled, So Your Local Park Foundation Needs a Strong Individual Giving Campaign. I'm about ready to go ahead and advance a couple of slides here. If you don't see the slides advancing, please let me know. The National Association of Park Foundations is the national leader in providing knowledge, skills, and capacity for local park foundations. We are in business, if you will, to work with you to help you enhance and strengthen your park foundations across the country and bring a sense of fun and enthusiasm to your parks and rec across the country in ways where donor dollars really complement that. The National Association's vision is to be active and with local park foundations and volunteers and support these citizens and volunteers that serve on your park foundation boards across the country. A couple of commercials here. We do want you to save the date for our first Midwest Regional Park Foundation Educational Workshop. This will be a half-a-day workshop, and it'll include lunch. We are going to also include some very respected speakers across the country. We'll have them here in Chicago on Wednesday, May 10th, from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We will have our function in suburban Chicago. Seats are limited, so we expect that the seats to sell out. Our educational tracks will include sponsorships and naming rights, social media and social marketing and how it benefits your local park foundation to have strong social media and social marketing. And then one of the other things that you all have called for is a panel discussion featuring best practice session hosted by and paneled by some of the more highly successful Park Foundation representatives. Our webinar is made possible by sponsorships, WT Engineering out of Hoffman Estates headquarters here in Hoffman Estates, Illinois, the consulting engineering firm of choice. If you have a need for WT Engineering, please give them a call or give us a call and we will connect you. Again, we're grateful to have WT Engineering on board with us as one of our educational sponsors, as well as Williams Architect out of Itasca, Illinois, and Canuti & Associates, a CPA accounting firm that does business not just here in Illinois, but elsewhere as well. Our foundation is funded by the Foundation for Sustainable Parks and Rec. FSPR is a big partner with the National Association of Park Foundations, and we're grateful for their support. So a couple of rules of the road for today's webinar. If you do have a question that you'd like to ask, please feel free to text me or the question in the questions panel, and I'll be more than happy to get you on if I can, or I'll personally answer your question so as though we don't break the cadence of the presenters. Questions will be answered directly to you by our presenters offline, away from the webinar, so you'll have that personal touch as well. So the NAPF, we suggest a fundraising strategy that is very diverse. Now this webinar is going to share just one main focus area of a fundraising strategy, and as we mentioned, it's entitled A Strong Individual Giving Campaign. Our speakers today are going to be Dr. Nathan Schaamleffel. Dr. Nathan represents Driven Strategic. He's also the Associate Professor and Campus Executive Director of the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance in the Department of Kinesiology, Recreation, and Sport at Indiana State University. He's also the author of the National Association of Park Foundations Cornerstone blog with Dr. Nathan Schaamleffel. Also speaking today is going to be Perry Totolis, who's the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships for Transnational. Perry is an award-winning professional in the field of online processing, and I think you're going to really benefit from hearing from Perry and his insights on a most important piece to a successful individual giving campaign, and that is the online experience that your donors experience when they come to make a donation to you. So your local park foundation needs a strong individual giving campaign. At this point, let me bring in Dr. Nathan. Dr. Nathan, turn your camera on. There you are. And I hope that you have your
I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Microphone on as well.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Nathan, take us through the steps and curriculum as it pertains to an individual giving campaign. Where do we start? Direct mail, online giving, estate planning? Tell us where to start. Give us a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today.
Will do. Well, thank you for joining us for the webinar today. Very much appreciated. I know many of you are members of the National Association of Park Foundations and hopefully are enjoying some of the extra services related to member services consulting that we've been providing. For those of you that are considering joining, we encourage you to do so, and we can help with many of the things through member services consulting that we're discussing today. I will also mention many of the same messages that I'm sharing today were highlighted in the February 2017 issue of NRPA's Parks and Recreation magazine, and it was an article titled "Forget About Grants, Annual Fundraising for Park Foundations and Friends Groups." So we'll be able to take more questions and answers today, specifically to your scenario, but we're going to kind of trim down the content of that article and hit some highlights that will facilitate some question and answers. So the first place to start to answer Donald's question, and the first thing that I need you to consider, is to simply forget about grants. You'll hear me talk a lot in my blog and articles about the G word, and the G word being grants, and grants aren't nasty. Grants have their place in annual fundraising, and quite frankly, grants have their place in Park Foundation and Friends Group operations. What I want you to understand is that to be a healthy, sustainable Park Foundation or Friends Group, you need a sustainable fundraising plan. And when you're entirely or almost entirely reliant on grants, you're only putting one egg in your basket, so to speak, with the Easter season coming. Grants just aren't the way to live. It's a hand-to-mouth experience, and that anything you're doing is going to end once that funding comes out. Also, not only when that funding ends does your services end, but also typically grant makers don't give you money to do just what you want to do. They have things that they need you to do for them, so you're going to take on more work beyond the scope of your strategic plan to satisfy the grant makers' needs for the programs and services that they need you to provide for the string attached to their funding. Also, the other thing about grants is they're just a black hole, and if you're not good at writing grant proposals, you're going to spend a lot of time chasing grant dollars and rarely get good return on investment. So you're going to live hand to mouth. It's soft money. It's like building your park foundation on quicksand instead of bedrock. And so I really want you to put grants kind of in their place and kind of put it down in the cabinet, not even on the back burner, until you can meet your annual operating expenses through a diverse fundraising strategies other than grants. The next message that I want to send very clearly is to put special event fundraising, and especially signature special event fundraising, not down in the cupboard, but put it on the far back burner. The reason I say that is signature and special events have their place. They're good at attracting prospects and new donors to replace donors that stop giving, but they do take a lot of time, and often special events can lose money, not even break even. And so what we want to do is help you set up a fundraising strategy that will net income. In the nonprofit world, we call profit, we call it net contributed income, and we want to make sure that you're getting good return on investment for the hours and the resources that you're investing in your fundraising function. And that doesn't start with grants, and it doesn't start with special events. As park and rec people, oftentimes park and recreation professionals are assigned to liaise with the Park Foundation Board or the Friends Group, and we're programmers by trade. We like events, we like programs, it's something we're comfortable with, to raise money. And so sometimes our default is a 5K or a golf scramble, those standard events that people do, galas, special events, and that's just not the go-to that we want you to go to with when you consider your park foundation. So the first two messages to take back to your park foundation and friends group is, one, forget about grants for now, and two, put special events on the back burner. What I'd really like to highlight is that fundraising is ultimately about relationship building, and I'm beyond the point of calling fundraising or even development. I prefer relationship building and resource development because to develop resources, whether it's cash or financial gifts, whether it's in-kind donations of equipment, supplies, or land, or whether it's increasing volunteerism that would replace personnel expenditures for the park foundation or public agency, ultimately any of those gifts of generosity, money, time, or equipment, supplies, and land, is about developing resources through relationship building. And so that's where fundraising starts. Relationships are based on ethics. And so we have to think about the Association of Fundraising Professionals Code of Ethical Standards, Donor Bill of Rights, E-Donor Bill of Rights, the APRA Prospect Research ethical standards, as well as the Grant Professional Association's professional standards for grant proposal preparation and administration, even to bring the G word back up, but they do have a code of standards. You'll find a lot of those links on my blog on the NAPF website, so don't feel like you have to get down every word. Go to the-napf.org, click on blog on the top, and then scroll all the way to the bottom and read the blogs from the bottom up, and you'll find many of these similar messages. The next thing that I need you guys to understand is that the board, all board members need to be a part of the development function, the relationship building function, the resource development function. Board members have a number of roles and responsibilities as board members, and financial resource development is one of those. And so all board members as volunteers are also fundraisers, and they need to be an integral part of the fundraising campaign, whether it's the annual campaign, a capital campaign, plan giving, whatever your park foundation takes on. Now, what that means is we need 100% board giving, which means one of the early documents that your park foundation needs to establish is a board giving policy, with the expectation that all board members give at a level that's generous for them, and that the board of their own giving generates about 60% of the annual campaign goal. That's going to not only help with fundraising with individual gifts, but it's also going to help with your ability to ascertain grants from grant makers down the road when you cross that bridge. The other thing that I would really like to highlight is that 80% of all charitable giving comes from individual giving. It's not the silver bullet that comes from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for $1 million or $25,000 or whatever it might be. It's the Bernie Sanders model for fundraising for an election, the Walmart model of high volume of purchases. It's that idea that we do a high volume of $25 to $250 individual gifts to really raise the money for your annual operating expenses. So coming back to that fact from philanthropy research that 80% of dollars come from individual gifts, that's why we want you to forget about grants, and that's why we want to put the time hog of special events on the back burner. What you're going to need once you've committed to really understanding that the role of your park foundation or your friends group is to support the work of the public agency is recognize that your park foundation or friends group needs to establish a memorandum of understanding between your park foundation and friends group and the public agency you support, and to ensure that your MOU recognizes that your park foundation or friends group that its function is to support the mission and vision and the strategic plan of the public recreation agency, so that there's a synchronous function of building relationships and resource development on behalf of the public agency. Once an MOU is in place, then you're going to make sure that your park foundation or friends group has a strong strategic plan that is a current strategic plan and that is managed from on a daily and weekly basis by your park foundation board or friends group board and your park foundation or friends group standing and ad hoc committees. And if you're lucky enough to have an executive director or some kind of administrative assistant to help with your park foundation, you definitely need to have the MOU first and then the strategic plan. Once you've created a strategic plan that includes the development or the relationship building and resource development function, you're going to establish a comprehensive fundraising case statement. The case statement is essentially a 7 to 10 page single space document, and it's all the reasons that you're a really great investment for a donor or a grant maker. This is an internal document for your board if you have staff and key fundraising volunteers and maybe some key major gift donors, to really outline why you're a good investment as an organization. This is kind of what I would call your armory of weapons that you're going to release in small snippets called case expressions, or what people would call marketing: billboards, tweets, direct mail letters, speeches, phone solicitation scripts. All of those things are carved from the case statement. The comprehensive fundraising case statement will replicate some information from the strategic plan. So the case statement is the first task for fundraising that comes out of your strategic plan and replicates some of that information. This is an internal document that you don't share with the general public. What you're going to share with the public is a YouTube video that is that is cut out of your 10 pages of case statement. It's going to be a 140-character tweet, a direct mail letter, or those other things you do in print and in mass media, online giving, websites to really make the ask, so to speak. Once you have your case statement, that's your third step. You have your MOU, then your strategic plan, and then your case statement. Then you're going to build what I call fundraising infrastructure. You're going to finalize that board giving policy that I alluded to earlier, and you're going to also establish a gift acceptance policy, because believe it or not, some donors may want to give you gifts that aren't something that are not something that you actually want to accept, like a dilapidated old RV that can't be sold, or an old building that doesn't meet ADA standards and has asbestos issues and is on a brownfield. That it actually may be in the best interest of the donor to give it to you for a tax deduction for their wealth management, but not be in the best interest of you being able to liquidate that real property, tangible property, and to turn it into dollars to benefit the public agency. So having a gift acceptance policy, having a board giving policy, and then the next thing you really need to do is establish a donor management system. A donor management system is a dynamic, cloud-based, encrypted, secure database system that you're going to want to subscribe to. And there's a number of products on the market like Bloomerang, Little Green, I'm struggling for the name of it. It's not Little Green Giant. It's a Little Green Wagon, I believe. There's Donor Perfect. There's eTapestry. There's DonorSnap. All of those are cloud-based donor management systems that allow you to track your relationships with your donors so that you can move them towards making an ask for your annual campaign. Also, the other thing I'd like to highlight is that your donor management system is going to allow you to acknowledge your donors. And I know that our second speaker is going to talk a whole lot about donor acknowledgement, and I want to just make a connection between what I have to say and what he has to say. There's a direct connection between the donor management system you use with the donor acknowledgement process, whatever that looks like for your Park Foundation or Friends Group. And also there's a significant component to many of these donor management systems to accept online gifts. And to also do e-newsletters, kind of like Constant Contact. So there's a lot of function in there for relationship building and donor acknowledgement. The last piece, at least for the purposes of this webinar, is to get into an annual fund development plan. And this is where you're going to want to really bring in more volunteers to help with your annual fund campaign beyond your board members. The average board size for a Park Foundation or Friends Group that I've seen in my experience is about 10. And for 10 board members to be board members and to handle all of the other legal and fiduciary oversight of the Park Foundation, 10 people is not enough to run the Park Foundation and to do the fundraising function. So I really suggest that the board establish in their bylaws a standing committee for relationship building and resource development. You might shorten it to a resource development committee. And you might have 1 or 2 of your elected board members from the Park Foundation serve on that committee. They don't necessarily have to chair it. And then what I'd like to see you do is to engage members of your Friends Group, not board members, but members of your Friends Group or Park Foundation. Many of you have set up your park foundations and friends groups to have membership classes as a part of your fundraising function, and I think it's critical that you do that. Many of you have also set up your park foundations without a membership class other than the board of directors, which really limits the ability in a lot of ways to raise money through an annual membership, and also it cuts off your ability to create a cadre of volunteers that are attached to the brand of your organization that will work on behalf of it for free. So I strongly encourage you, as you're looking at building your fundraising infrastructure, to look at your bylaws and to consider retooling your park foundation or friends group to have a membership class system where people can actually join and get something for their membership, and then also engage them in the work of the park foundation or friends group. And by far the biggest function of a park foundation is resource development. It's to generate money, volunteerism, equipment, supplies, and land to benefit the strategic or master plan of the public agency you serve. So there's a lot of utility in engaging members in the resource development function. Once you establish your resource development committee, you may find that a board member on that committee may chair it, or one of the volunteers on the committee, one of the members, could actually chair that committee. Once that committee gets to work, they're going to finalize the things I've talked about already, and then they're going to get into establishing what we call an annual fund development plan. An annual fund development plan is a dynamic plan that is used to plan out how you're going to achieve your fundraising goal. So some park foundations and friends group I work with use a $10,000 fundraising goal. Others are raising $5 million. It just depends on the evolution and the robustness and maturity of where your park foundation and friends group is at. Regardless of how much you're raising, 10,000 or 5 million, the annual fund development plan looks the same. It's a very strategic plan to take the elephant that you want to eat. I always hear people say, oh, we can't eat an elephant. I say, sure you can, one bite at a time. We have to put the elephant on paper in the annual fund development plan, and we have to carve that elephant up into digestible pieces so that the committee can achieve first downs throughout your fiscal year to achieve your fundraising goal. And so the annual fund development plan has snippets of your case statement, because in your fundraising case statement, you're going to talk about donor acknowledgement. You're also going to bring that donor acknowledgement process from your fundraising case statement into your annual fund development plan, and you're going to outline the different strategies, or what we call fundraising vehicles, to get to your fundraising goal. So currently I'm working with a number of park foundations, and one I'm putting together an annual fund development plan with their executive director to raise $50,000. I think the sample that Donald has on the slide, can you advance to the slide with the table, Donald? Okay, just back. There you go, this one. This is the table from the article that I published in the February 2017 issue of Parks and Recreation magazine, and that is free and available online if you just search for it, or you can follow it by email and I'll send you the link. But this is the basis for an annual fund development plan. It's really looking at your financial resources, so looking at your past audits, your PF 990s, and your past budgets for the last few fiscal years, and then looking at your budget for the next fiscal year or two, and saying, how much do we need to raise? How much do we need to raise to at least break even on our annual operating budget? And is that realistic? So this example is based on a $100,000 goal that you can see on the bottom right. And you can see that there are a variety of fundraising strategies. I recommend for the average park foundation or friends group to have board giving as an absolute first fundraising strategy, not only 100% board giving, but significant board giving at the leadership level. And then I need you to consider at least 5 more fundraising strategies. Now you'll likely pick 5 or more of the ones on this table, and I've already talked about the membership function. Many park foundations and friends groups, and often the ones set up with the name Park Foundation, such and such Park Foundation, I'm finding are set up in their bylaws not to have membership classes, and the groups that are set up as friends of, even though a park foundation and a friends of group are the same thing, they're both nonprofit corporations at the Secretary of State level in their home state, but most often they also have 501c3 status from the federal IRS and have been classified as a public charity. Apples to apples, they're the same things, but I'm finding by and large, park foundations are set up without membership classes, where many friends groups are set up with membership classes in their bylaws. I would really encourage all park foundations and all friends groups, for the most part, all to strongly consider updating their bylaws to add that membership class. You can see it's 30% of the example of this annual fund. Now, for the board giving, I need you guys to understand something called the 80-20 rule in fundraising and philanthropy. It's that 80% of the annual fund will come from the top 20% of donors. So 80% of a $100,000 fundraising goal is actually $80,000. That 80 of the $100,000 come from the top 20% of donors, and 12 to 15% of that top 20% of donors should be your board members. And so I know a lot of you might have sticker shock right now, or maybe choking on your lunch while you listen to this webinar, but by and large, park foundations and friends groups are notorious for having park lovers who are willing to volunteer their time and talent in lieu of their gift, or if they are giving, it's a nominal amount of less than $100 a year. And quite frankly, the number one reason that park foundations and friends groups don't raise significant dollars that benefit their public agency is because of the example set with board giving. And the example set by board giving is directly connected to board member recruitment from the governance committee of your park foundations and friends groups. The governance committee, or that some of you might call it a nominating committee, are looking at people who love the parks that have skills. It's great that people have affinity for your park system, but they also need to have capacity. There's a way to take people who have affinity with nominal capacity and engage them as volunteers. You need to be looking from a board member recruitment with your nominating committee or your governance committee to recruit board members that have affinity and capacity. In the fundraising world, we call that LAI. We call it linkage, ability, and interest. That's another way of saying affinity and capacity. They need to have a link to your park system. They need to have interest in your park system, but they also need ability and capacity. It means they need to have a few bucks in their pocket to give at a leadership level. When I'm talking about a leadership level, I'm talking more than $1,000. So just figure, if a $100,000 fundraising goal, 80% of the fundraising goal, 80,000, is supposed to come from the top 20% of donors. That means about 60 to 65,000 should be coming from the board members, personal pockets. And I know that's a lot. So if you look here, you see 20% in this example. At 20, I know most of you are probably choking on your lunch over the 20,000. Just realize philanthropy research shows that should be 60 to 65. So I tried to temper this example to be more in line with what a park foundation or friends group board might be able to strive to do in the next 3 to 5 fiscal years. But continuing to move your board to leadership level. It's very, very intentional that board giving is the #1 strategy here, and it's very, very intentional that signature or special events is almost at the bottom on the back burner. And it's super, super intentional that you don't see the G word, you don't see grants on this initial annual fund plan. Once you have board giving,
let me jump in real quick.
Go ahead, Donald.
And just say that I think you're doing a phenomenal job, and several of the comments that we are getting online here are suggesting the same thing. We have a very engaged group of people here representing close to over 28 different states on this webinar, as well as a representative from British Columbia. And you're definitely resonating with your information. One of the biggest questions or comments has been coming in, has been asking whether or not this will be recorded, this webinar, and the answer to that is yes, folks, we will have this recorded, and we will have it on the National Association of Park Foundation website for all the public consumption within a week after our webinar. Doc, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but several of the people have been asking that question, and it was just easier for me to share that information.
I'm glad you did. And there hasn't been hardly a nugget that I've said today that's not in the NRPA article that was in February or what's on our blog at the-napf.org. A lot of resources there that NAPF's providing you guys to improve your fundraising. What you'll see is that successful fundraising campaigns, if you look at the slide that's on now, you'll see that many of the strategies there just above the bottom logo mimic what was in the table. Board giving and membership are the two most important things you can do. And what you need to understand from an annual fund campaign is that an annual fund does not mean that we ask prospects and donors to give once a year annually. We have to ask our prospects and donors to give multiple times a year to fund the operating expenses that we annually incur. So annual fund is a little bit misleading because it leads most people new to philanthropy and fundraising to think it means we ask people once a year to give. It actually means we ask people a whole lot of times to give, the same people to give multiple times a year, so that we can basically raise our annual operating expenses to keep our doors open and do business in a sustainable way, so that our park foundation is built on bedrock, not on quicksand. And so the membership strategy is the first gift of the year. When they renew when they join as a member or renew or sustain their annual membership, that's their first gift to the foundation or friends group a year. And then we're going to follow up with those members to give at direct mail, to give through online strategies, direct email, crowdfunding, phone solicitation, as well as face-to-face ask, sales, and contract services. So there's a number of strategies there. Direct mail, and I know I'm about out of time here, but I want to make sure I make a key point that direct mail after board giving and membership, direct mail is still king. I know a lot of you think it's a waste of postage, we're green, we're parks, we shouldn't cut down trees to ask for money. The bottom line is that the return on investment is just proven to be too great to eliminate direct mail. And I know a lot of your board members are going to say, oh, well, we can use GoFundMe and put it on our social media Facebook page. And, you know, quite frankly, and I'm not going to argue, online giving has gone up precipitously, and I'm sure Perry will highlight that over the last 15 years, especially in the last 5. It has gone up tremendously. But more people raise more money when they mail a direct mail letter, and then that actually spurs online giving, because people come home from work, they reach in their mailbox, they get a letter from the National Park Foundation or National Parks Conservation Association or whatever group it is, the Wilderness Society, and they sit down at their laptop in their kitchen, and it's a reminder to give. And so if you don't send that direct mail letter, you're actually not prompting them to give online, and understanding that there's a 1-2 punch. With these giving strategies. You mail a letter. If they don't respond to the letter with a gift, 2 weeks later you follow up with an email asking them, hey, did you get your letter? Please click here to give online. If they don't respond to the email, then you follow up by phone. Hey, we emailed you and called. Would you consider giving? So there's real strategy with doing that. If you were to go back to the table, Donald, that was on there before, you'll actually notice that you can see the trend from direct mail to direct email to phone solicitation, that it goes from 20% to 7% to 3%, because we're gonna raise 20% with direct mail, and then those that don't respond are gonna get a direct email, and we're gonna get less of a response, but we'll still get some, and then those that don't respond there will get hit with phone solicitation. Even though a lot of people don't like it, it still has its utility in fundraising. But you'll see that that's very intentional, that decreases basically by about 2/3 when we go from 20 to 7 to 3. So I really need you to consider, when you put together an annual fund, that you start with board giving, look to add membership in the next fiscal year or 2, and then go with a quarterly direct mail campaign. Go with the seasons, go with spring, summer, fall, and then early winter for your early winter, your 4th quarter ask to be an end of the year ask before the end of the tax year, where people are looking to reduce their taxable income, and do it with the seasons. And if most of you start with a direct mail campaign 4 times a year, follow up all 4 of those direct mail campaigns 2 weeks later with direct email, and 1 to 2 weeks later with phone solicitation, you're going to have a lot of luck. In terms of individual giving, you'll see that many of these strategies are set up for individual giving to capture that 80% of charitable dollars coming from individuals. You can also see that there's an opportunity to do face-to-face asks to corporations for sponsorship, and also to look at foundations in different ways, whether it's contract services, sales, sponsorship for your signature special event, or down the road, 5 fiscal years from now, when you are meeting your expenses without grants, you can actually add a grant or 2 into your fundraising strategies, and then you would be raising money in your annual fund from individuals, and then from corporations and foundations and other grant makers, like maybe local, city, county, state, or federal government. So I think that's what I have to say today. I'll let Donald take lead here, and I'd be glad to add anything, Donald, if you need me to, or if I'm close to the end or at the end or over my time.
No, we're definitely appreciate it. I think that we all would agree we could probably spend another couple of hours engaged with you here in conversation about how to strengthen our local park foundations. Your Your efforts today have been awesome, as it has been mentioned before through some comments that we've gotten. There is one question, just one question real quick, Doc, take about 30 seconds, and then I'll follow up with Christy via email. But throughout the course of the year, you mentioned a couple ways to keep your members engaged. What are your thoughts about foundation socials throughout the year?
I like those, and this is something I neglected to include, is understanding the connection between volunteer management or volunteer relationships and donor relationships. I've already made the connection to forget about grants and to focus on individual giving with an annual fund, because 80% of all charitable giving comes from individuals. But guess who your most reliable individual givers are? It's your volunteers and it's your members. And so if you neglect volunteer management strategies, you're neglecting your donor relationships. And so when your volunteer manager honks off a volunteer, they've also honked off your most reliable group of individual givers. So bringing your members together for members-only events, or members and bring a guest type events throughout the year, membership appreciation events, whether it's simply a picnic and a private pool time so that it's just the members at the pool at one of your park and recreation facilities, anything along those lines. First day hikes, a lot of you are doing first day hikes. That's a great friends group or foundation event to do. Certain parties or members only, or bring a guest. They're great ways to engage your members and to also bring in a volunteer management function. What I'm seeing across the country is that most park foundations and friends groups are not engaging enough people beyond their board. And it's really impacting their ability to raise dollars and to engage volunteers and to make a significant project impact difference on particular indoor and outdoor facilities or programs or historic preservation for the Public Recreation Agency.
Thank you, Doc, very much. Certainly appreciate that. And I know that we also have been receiving several other questions that we just weren't able to really get on with you. I promise you we will be forwarding those questions on to Dr. Nathan for his personal response to you via email. I'd like to continue on with a real quick transition to Perry's chat. One of the additional components to a successful annual giving campaign is donor recognition. The other, which is just as important, is user-friendly online donation processing. I want to share with you just a couple of things with respect to donor recognition. Don't forget to send thank you notes. It's an easy task. It's a time-consuming task. It's one that your volunteers and committee can certainly do. Don't forget about them and their importance. Certainly use your press releases in your local community. Mention in the annual report of your park foundation the name or the amount of the give, how important it was. Donor recognition walls and donor appreciation events are two other areas for donor recognition. I wanted to just share a couple of more public, more visible displays of donor recognition, whether they are outside in your parks and ravers, or whether they are inside your buildings in the vestibule, or perhaps maybe decorating the wall with donor recognition information. And these days, there are recognition services companies that can actually provide for you a changeable document or changeable display, I mean, from year to year. So there's plenty of ways for us to be able to recognize our donors. It is just as much of an important piece than to an individual giving campaign as all of our strategies have been that we've talked about today. Recognition Services Group out of Buffalo Grove is one of our partners in this respect. We encourage you to contact them for their ideas and certainly for some of their concepts to support your individual giving campaign. At this time and for the rest of the 15 or 20 minutes that we have left, I'd like to bring in Perry. Perry, you want to turn your camera on there? Everybody see Perry? Awesome. Perry represents Transnational Strategic Partnerships and will provide us with user-friendly payment processing and online donation experiences that make sense for us as nonprofit organizations in our community. And Perry, why don't you share with us your slides and how important it is for a donor recognition I'm sorry, donor experience online when it comes to individual giving.
Yep. Thank you, Donald. We appreciate being here, and we appreciate the time to talk to you and educate you on, for those of you that may have some lacking experience in how the payment processing space works and how that applies to donations and ultimately affects your bottom line. You know, as Dr. Nathan alluded to through his presentation, once you've been able to build the foundation and build the drive to raise funds, one of the most often forgotten or put to last pieces of that is, well, how are we going to take all of this money? Online donations account for nearly 8% of all donations, and that's growing on average just under 10% year over year. And 14% of online donations now take place via a mobile device. So once you have this $100,000 a year plan or whatever your fundraising goal is, a good portion of that is going to run through credit cards, and the fees that are associated with that can greatly, in some cases, diminish the amount of funds that are going and contributing towards your mission. So approximately $2.1 billion in U.S.-based charitable giving was online. So we're talking significant numbers, and again, as Dr. Nathan, you really set the stage pretty well, alluded to. There are multiple touch points in which you're able to communicate with your base, and the ability to provide them an easy-to-use link to make that donation. The more times you can get that in front of them, the more effective you're going to be at collecting that money. And when we talk about what is online, what is donating online, I look at it a number of different ways. So, and I'm sure most of you do this currently with your foundations. So we have web pages, right? Donate now buttons. If we could raise hands, I'm sure that the vast majority of you would raise your hand if you have a donate now button on your web page. You have marketing campaigns, which are embedding either an address to send a check or a link, hopefully, to your donation page. You have kiosk services at events. So when you're running your events, you're doing these gatherings and these socials. You know, are you making it easy at those events for people to give you money to further your mission? Silent auction software can also, I believe, sort of flow into this. Anytime a transaction, a credit card transaction or an ACH transaction is taking place via the internet, you're not receiving a check, you're not receiving cash. This all applies to online donations, as well as mobile apps, crowdfunding, social media. All of these different vehicles provide a method to donate online. And if you're not utilizing a few or multiples of these, there's a good chance that you're not appealing to the way that your base wants to provide you with funds. So really the purpose of this is to educate you, and we're going to focus on 3 different types of payment processors in this space that you probably do business with today, and some of the things to keep in mind as you're looking at these, and some of the biggest differences between them. And ultimately the goal here is for you to understand how particularly the fees work. Credit card processing is a relatively predatory industry, as I'm sure a lot of you have potentially experienced. Particularly in working with not-for-profits that are volunteer-based, processors historically know that there is a general lack of insight into how the space works. There's a lot of very nice, very functional software out there that exists that monetize their business almost entirely off of the processing rates and fees that they charge you on a per-transaction basis. Now, that's not to say that those aren't good products, because there's a lot of great products out there, but when you start looking at the percentages that they're taking and the gross amount of profit margin in them, you know, we really like you to be in a position where you can make the educated decision on whether or not that's a good product for you. Because when you start seeing all the features and benefits, you know, oftentimes the large cost of what those are on a per transaction basis can get lost or be hidden pretty well. So we're going to focus on payment facilitators, most of which you've probably already heard of: PayPal, Stripe, Square, donation platforms, fundraising sites, and crowdfunding sites. And then we're going to talk about traditional third-party processors and really the biggest differences between the three of those, if you can continue. So start with donation platforms, fundraising sites. A lot of these names are going to be familiar to you. So through an aggregation site that I get a lot of good information from. This really breaks down how percentages look when you're working with Network for Good, Bright Funds, GoFundMe. There's other products called Donor Perfect, Donate Now, that are really, really slick, really nice platforms in which you can brand them, and you can very easily take donations through mobile, through your website, through email marketing campaigns. But as we go down and we look at the average costs of these, and this is in addition to any potential licensing fees that I don't have up here, you're looking on the low end, 2.9% and 30 cents, so 60 cents on every $100 plus 3 to 5%. So you're upwards almost $1 for every $100 that you're taking in. All the way up to 7.5%, 8% plus transaction fees for these products. And as we continue and you start looking at, well, what are the actual costs of these? How much profit margin is actually built into this? It's pretty startling. Now, all of these products, though, have a very solid purpose. It's really just a matter of you understanding that 75 cents potentially on every $100 could be going to profit a for-profit organization. And when you're talking about a few $1,000s, that's one thing. But when you start talking about raising funds over the course of years, or a year in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, your $100,000 annual raise now just turned into, well, we have to raise $110,000 to actually hit our goal, solely because of processing fees. Payment facilitators, we call them PayFacs. So these are your companies like PayPal, Square, Stripe, very common companies out there that generally provide Donate Now, very simple buttons that go on your website, export the individual donating to a third-party site where they can then give money. And again, these products are very simple. They're easy to obtain.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. They're easy to obtain, but again, when you start looking at the average cost of what is it gonna cost us to process payments through these sites, you're anywhere from 60 to 85, 90 cents on $100 for every $100 that you bring. And the purpose of all of this, as you look at these, is making the decision of how are we going to communicate and drive people to our donation pages. And once we get them there, what's the most economically responsible way, so the most convenient, the most clean, easy to use, and economical way for us to collect this money, right? So we always want to make sure that our customer essentially is comfortable and feels a sense of convenience when providing that donation. And quite frankly,
let me jump in real quick with a quick question.
Sure.
Because this seemingly is something that applies across the spectrum. So there are some processors who will actually, when you hit the Donate Now button, you almost feel like you got to give everything, including your blood type, just so that you can make a donation. In your opinion, what might be some of the more user-friendly platforms out there?
So with a traditional shopping cart, there's certain information that a credit card processor we need to have. So we need to have your address, your zip code minimally, this obviously card number and the CB2 code on the back of the card. Some of the PayPal's product, if you're choosing to pay with your PayPal account, can be very simple, but again, the fees for that can be a little on the high side. Most donation shopping carts, though, will ask for the bare necessities in order for us to be able to process that payment with the processing hosts. And also for us to capture enough information to ensure that transaction is a secure transaction and to mitigate any potential fraud. So we really like to capture address, and as an organization, you like to capture address too, because that's one of the best ways for us to validate the legitimacy of a card in addition to the CB2 code, that 3-digit code in the back of the card. But some of these payment aggregators, particularly PayPal, would give your customers the option of paying with their PayPal account. You're looking at a relatively small percentage of the population that prefers that method, but the individuals who do will pay with through their PayPal account pretty readily.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. So, and then there's traditional third-party processors. So transnational, we're a third-party processor. We're not an aggregator. We're not a donation platform per se. We work directly with, and there's thousands of organizations like ours that I'm sure a lot of you work with today, that we work directly with the payment networks, and we are able to pass through our costs directly to our not-for-profits and our for-profit businesses. When you start working with third-party processors, a couple of the differences between us and the other guys is we don't really have these elaborate platforms built out very specifically for the not-for-profit space. But what we're able to do is we're able to take, and as you can see by the graph, we're able to take significantly lower percentages in most categories and pass those on to you. And we're able to take our processing in many cases and plug them into your website, create very inexpensive to no cost donate now pages, very simple shopping carts, or plug into a software or a giving platform that you've chosen. And when you work through a third-party processor, not always the best option for what you're trying to accomplish. Generally speaking, so long as you're working with an ethical organization that is working to help you accomplish your mission, you should be paying significantly lower fees. And that's very simply because we're able to pass those costs through to you. And if you look at the cost of a debit card, and if you're looking at an average ticket of under $100, it's a little over, but around $100, the vast majority of those cards that you're going to see are going to be debit cards, in which case the percentages and the transaction fees are extremely low. So you're paying 26 cents on every $100. The goal, and I believe the goal should be for a payment processor in our position and others, is to help you further and advance your mission. And credit card processing can be a very tricky slope, and there's a lot of opportunistic individuals and organizations out there to prey on those that might not look at it all that often. So, a mission is an important goal or purpose that's accompanied by a strong conviction, calling or vocation, and we firmly believe that it's the processors in place to help facilitate you accomplishing your mission, and in turn we accomplish ours. So, happy to take any questions at any time.
There have been a couple that have come across, and Perry, for interest of time, I've mentioned to a couple of the questions that we would send them on directly to you so you can respond directly in a private email back to them. Thank you so much for your willingness to be on the call with us. We are grateful to have you. Certainly even more grateful that your company and your services have been referred to us by actually one of our members here at the National Association of Park Foundations in the Wheaton Park and Rec Foundation in Wheaton, Illinois. So we're excited to have you as part of our family and part of our support, and certainly thank you so much for your expertise on the call today.
Thank you, Donald.
We are about ready to wrap the call. Anything that you would like to learn more about the National Association of Park Foundations, please let us know that you're interested in joining us as members. Certainly be aware that we do have other things that help educate your citizens and volunteers who are governing your park foundations, and we'd be grateful to have you all as members. For any questions, and certainly for anything that you might have need answers for after we conclude our call today, please feel free to contact me, Donald Ortel, the Executive Director of the National Association of Park Foundations, either by phone or via email at dortale@the-napf.org. I want to thank all of you for attending today and for sticking with us throughout the course of the hour that we've been on the call. Thank you so much to Dr. Nathan Schaumleffel for your support, your help, your expertise. We encourage you to go to the National Association of Park Foundation website and read Dr. Nathan's publications and blogs that he's done for the National Association. Thank you all very much for attending. I hope you all have a great weekend. Continued success with your local park foundation in enhancing the park experience across the country. Thank you all very much. This concludes our webinar for today. Have a great weekend.